hour, we did give direction to staff regarding the case of animal legal defense versus Mendocino County. But we still will go back into closed session after our open session here to still discuss keep the code versus Mendocino County as well as labor negotiations. So the next thing on our agenda is item 5I, which is discussion and possible formation of an ad hoc committee on the larger rate adjustment requested of solid waste of Willits. So we have a staff report. Mike Sweeney, do you want to lead that off?
The county received a larger rate increase request from Solid Waste of Willits last month. Now, under the franchise contracts, the collection rates normally are adjusted every January 1st using a formula for CPI and so on. And using that formula, the collection rates would essentially be unchanged on January 1 because the small increase in CPI is offset by a decline in fuel prices and disposal expense. So SWOW seeks that to be put aside, and instead they want to invoke the larger rate increase provision of its contracts, which allow the company to apply for increases above and beyond the normal rate adjustments. Accordingly, SWOW has requested a 5.7% increase in North County Franchise Area Number 1, a 6.2% increase in Anderson Valley Franchise Area Number 3, and an 8.9% increase in South Coast Franchise Area Number 4. Alternatively, SWOW suggests an annual county subsidy paid to SWOW of $157,856, which is approximately the annual increase in revenue that SWOW would expect to receive from the rate increases. SWOW asks that the county waive the procedural steps set forth in the contracts for the larger rate increase, specifically an outside audit, a rate-setting study, and public hearings in each of the affected collection areas. Now, the justification for the request is losses that SWOW reports on 2 of the 3 franchise areas and on 6 of the 7 transfer stations that it operates. While SWOW reports losses on these smaller operating divisions, it also reports profits on its larger divisions and an overall corporate operating profit of $292,347 for the year ended September 30th, 2015. This has apparently been insufficient in the eyes of SWOW's principal lender, however, and SWOW states the following in its letter, which you have before you. Quote, "Most importantly, poor operating results of grantees' overall operations these past 2 years have resulted in the company's banking institution to call all of its term loans and non-renewal of the letter of credit that supports the bond funding of the company's recyclable material processing facility." End quote. There is also an implication in SWOW's letter that continuation of service to the county is in question, and SWOW therefore urges a prompt decision on its request. The decision on how to respond to SWOW's request lies with the Board of Supervisors, and it should be based on an analysis of much more information than we currently possess. There will be difficult policy choices that you must make, and I believe that an ad hoc committee of 2 supervisors would be valuable in ensuring that all necessary information is obtained from SWOW and carefully analyzed before alternatives and recommendations are brought back to the full board.
Thanks for the report. Any comments or suggestions from supervisors? You want your microphone?
I just wanted to say that I think that Mr. Ward and his his CPA, Mr. Jones, have met with all the board members. Is that correct?
No.
No. Oh, okay. I had occasion to meet with them. I think it must have been the week of the 15th. I can't remember. It was the week before Christmas. And, I think what they told me that day was just summarized very well by Mr. Sweeney. I agree with Mr. Sweeney's recommendation. I think it's a recommendation before us here. that we appoint an ad hoc committee, and I just want to say to the chair of the board that I am willing to serve on that ad hoc committee.
Okay, Supervisor Brown.
Thank you. And I'm very glad to hear Supervisor Hamburg say that. I went through the agenda item and I wrote down 2 names because I believe both these individuals have worked on solid waste contracts previously, and I put Supervisor Hamburg and McCowan would be the ad hoc. So that would be my recommendation.
Supervisor Woodhouse.
I did have a chance to look into this, and it affects my district and Supervisor Hamburg's district, I believe, and I am willing to work on the ad hoc at the chair's discretion, whatever you think would be best.
Supervisor McCowan, your name was mentioned.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, it affects the county and it affects the ratepayers. It affects the
it's-
county. Wait, so I had it right to begin with, right? Would you leave my button alone? I have enough people pushing my buttons. So I believe this issue does affect the county and my district least of all in a direct sense, but it affects numerous ratepayers throughout the county. You know, I'm willing to go along with an ad hoc. I'd be happy to serve on it. However, we've had an interest expressed by both Supervisor Woodhouse and Supervisor Hamburg. I have no objection to them being the ad hoc. I do have a lot of direct experience having negotiated with Jerry Ward directly with the assistance of Mike Sweeney and Supervisor Pinches. He and I were an ad hoc at the time when we were able to divest ourselves of the direct operation of the small transfer stations in the county. And so I could see a value to me participating, but at the same time, our solid waste director, Mr. Sweeney, is, I think, kind of the subject matter expert for solid waste, certainly one of the subject matter experts in the county. He also has the full history of that prior negotiation, but I think it's important to highlight what some of the enhancements that were given to solid waste at that time, and I know that Director Sweeney can provide that in detail to the ad hoc, but basically there were rate increases given in several of the franchise areas. There were gate fee increases given for the transfer stations, and then there were annual adjustment mechanisms built in also for such things like cost of fuel and CPI, and that over the I think the last 3 years since those agreements have been fully in place, rates have gone up probably an average of about 12% across the board. So I think it's important to recognize that solid waste of Willits was given significant financial enhancements, and maybe most significantly, the agreements were extended out long term. So the existing franchise agreements, which already had a number of years to run, were extended out, I think, a range of 7 to 9 additional years. And so I think all this history is something that the ad hoc needs to keep in mind as you go forward. And frankly, with the assistance of Director Sweeney, scrutinize the financial information that's presented, because it's solid waste finance accounting can be very tricky given the number of related party transactions that are common in the industry, and Supervisor Hamburg is well versed in that. So I guess I would just pause there and ask if if Director Sweeney agrees essentially with what I've said so far as kind of a broad brush review of some of the history.
Yes, I think it's important to look back and see that we made a deal with Solid Waste of Willits in 2010. And the request before you is to change the terms of that deal,
Right.
which should be considered. It's important that the information from Solid Waste of Willits be considered objectively and openly. And I think that their request for quick action can also be accommodated. And I would urge that the ad hoc, whoever might be on it, schedule a meeting as soon as possible.
With that, I will move the recommended action with Supervisors Hamburg and Woodhouse being appointed to the ad hoc.
Is that okay with you? I'll second the motion, and, just to kind of embellish what Supervisor McCowan and Supervisor Woodhouse said, when you look at the effects of these rate increases, they're significant, 5.7 to 8.9%, and of course they do hit your constituents and mine the hardest. I had some concerns on page 3 under number 5 where it talks about the county knew of the desperate operating results. I think it meant disparate operating results of the small volume transfer stations. And then the point is made further down in that paragraph that the company relied upon information that was supplied to it by the county, and that those projections made by the county on which SWOW made their business decisions have not materialized. I don't know if that's an attempt to kind of blame us for their. I don't think it's our fault that they're in the straits they're in. At the same time, I think there's a real, there's an interest in the employees that they pay. There's an interest in keeping the service going. So I do think there's a lot of things to look at here. And of course, I'm glad to serve on an ad hoc with Supervisor Woodhouse.
Well, before we make a motion, I just would like to say that I'm a little skeptical that their number.
I did make a motion.
Yeah. Oh, before we vote on the motion, I'm just a little skeptical that the number of the volume that's coming into the facilities could be possibly lower than they expected because, I see Mr. Sweeney shaking his head because, for example, I've heard a complaint from one of the one of the nonprofits that runs sort of a secondhand store, and that people sometimes in the evening will drop off goods that are not even suitable for selling at the secondhand store, and they then pick it up, take it over to the transfer station at Casper. They told me that in the past, the county employees were not charging them because they weren't charging their nonprofit. But Mendocino Solid Waste of Willits is under the operating agreement. They're charging, and they have a right to charge. There's no exemption for that. So I'm just giving that as an anecdotal example of where that was not getting the county employees were not collecting a fee, and that Mendocino Solid Waste Willits employees are collecting a fee at the gate. So that's why I'm saying I'm a little skeptical that the revenues could possibly be lower than expected. So we have a motion on the table.
Okay.
Do we have any public comments on the motion? On this agenda item? Okay, vote by the button.
Well, I would just say that I had noted the same phrase that the projections provided by county staff have not materialized, and I think just to kind of clear the air, that's one more issue that the ad hoc could certainly review with the company. But, other than that, I'm very comfortable with going ahead with this action.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, that takes care of all of our action items for today, except that we are now going back into closed session to address two of the items that we weren't able to deal with at lunchtime, which is keep the code versus Mendocino County and labor negotiations. Oh, we did.
We did. Do you want to huddle with Mike?